In Hollywood's golden age, image was everything. Unmarried pregnancies and love child scandals could end a star's career overnight. Yet a surprising number of famous actresses did have babies outside of wedlock, whether by secret adoption or illicit affair, and their stories were meticulously covered up at the time. This script explores the old Hollywood actresses who had children without marriage or from extramarital affairs, revealing scandals, cover-ups, and shocking quotes from those who knew. Ingrid Bergman. Ingrid Bergman in the late 1940s, around the time her affair scandal shocked Hollywood. Ingrid Bergman had a wholesome reputation in the 1940s, until she fell in love with Italian director Roberto Rossellini while still married. In 1950, she gave birth to Rossellini's son out of wedlock, igniting an international scandal. The outcry was so intense that Bergman was denounced on the floor of the U.S. Senate. Senator Edwin C. Johnson excoriated her as unprincipled and having a powerful evil influence over the public, even suggesting actors who committed scandals should be forced to retire forever. Hollywood studios effectively banished Bergman, and she exiled herself to Europe for years. She would later return triumphantly and win another Oscar, proving Hollywood's memory can be short. Bergman's own view was unapologetic. She followed her heart, though it meant losing her good girl image overnight. The Bergman-Rossellini baby and the Senate slap it provoked remain one of Hollywood's most infamous out-of-wedlock baby scandals. Loretta Young. Loretta Young's story was a real-life melodrama. In 1935, the unmarried 22-year-old devout Catholic actress had a passionate affair with her co-star Clark Gable, who was married to someone else. When Young became pregnant, she knew an illegitimate child could destroy her career. She vanished from Hollywood, giving birth in secret to a baby girl in November 1935. A few weeks later, Loretta staged an elaborate cover-up. She claimed to adopt an infant girl from an orphanage, who was in fact her own daughter, Judy. For years, Loretta maintained the charade that Judy was an adopted child. Not until decades later did she finally confess the truth in her authorized biography, admitting Judy was her and Gable's biological daughter. The lengths of this cover-up were astonishing. At one point, Loretta even had Judy's ears surgically altered to hide their resemblance to Gable's famously big ears. Hollywood gossip whispered the truth for years, but it wasn't publicly confirmed until Judy Lewis wrote her memoir, Uncommon Knowledge, in 1994. Even more disturbing, Loretta's family later alleged that the conception may not have been consensual. Young's daughter-in-law claimed Clark Gable had essentially date-raped Loretta during a train ride. Loretta herself never used that word, but she did uphold her strict Catholic values by refusing an abortion, calling it a mortal sin, and instead orchestrating the adoption ruse. This secret baby saga remained one of Hollywood's best-kept secrets for over 50 years. As ABC News noted, Young disappeared from Hollywood, had the baby in secret, and later pretended to adopt her own daughter. The scandal of having an illegitimate child would surely have ended her career. Constance Bennett. Constance Bennett, a glamorous star of the 1920s and 30s and sister of Joan Bennett, pulled off a daring deception regarding her son. In the late 1920s, Constance divorced her second husband, millionaire Philip Plant. 3 years later, she returned to the U.S. from Europe with a 3-year-old boy in tow, introduced to the press as Peter Bennett Plant, whom she claimed to have adopted in Europe. Her announcement raised eyebrows. Where did this child really come from? Only many years later did the truth emerge. Peter was actually Constance's biological child by her ex-husband Plant. In court, Bennett finally admitted she never adopted Peter at all. He was her own son from her marriage, hidden away during the messy divorce. She concocted the adoption story to prevent her ex from trying to claim custody of the boy. For a time, Hollywood and the public accepted that Constance was simply a generous single woman who'd adopted a child overseas. The reality was a tangled mix of love, lies, and legal strategy. Constance Bennett's ploy shows the extreme steps actresses took to keep control of their children when traditional norms and vindictive ex-husbands might interfere. It took untangling a long mystery for the shocking truth to come out. Joan Crawford, screen legend. Joan Crawford longed for children but was unable to have them biologically. In the 1940s, she took the then unconventional route of adopting children as a single mother. This was illegal for an unmarried woman in California at the time, but Joan found a loophole by arranging adoptions out of state. She adopted her first daughter, Christina, in 1939 through a Nevada agency, pretending to be a Nevada resident. Over the next few years, Crawford acquired a brood, a son, Christopher, and twin baby girls, Kathy and Cindy. She often had to pull strings. For example, the infant twins were obtained through the notorious Tennessee Children's Home Society, run by Georgia Tann, a woman later exposed as a prolific baby trafficker. Unbeknownst to Joan, the agency had literally stolen many babies from birth mothers. Joan's twins were delivered to her in a hotel suite via Tann's black market adoption ring. One earlier adoption even fell apart. In 1941, Joan adopted a boy, but his birth mother kidnapped him back, allegedly to extort money from the star. Despite these dramas, Crawford persevered in building her family on her own. Crawford chose to adopt children, doing so as a single woman, which was illegal in California at the time, notes People magazine. She simply wouldn't take no for an answer. However, Joan's career-centric approach to motherhood had a dark side, as detailed in daughter Christina's memoir, Mommy Dearest, which accused Crawford of being an abusive, mercurial mother. Regardless of that infamy, Joan Crawford was among the first major stars to openly raise children without a husband, defying both law and convention to do so. Marian Davies. Marian Davies, a top actress of the 1920s, is equally famous for her long affair with publishing tycoon William Randolph Hearst. Hearst was married, but estranged from his wife, throughout his 32-year relationship with Davies. For decades, rumors swirled that Marian had borne Hearst a secret child. The story goes that around 1919, Marian had a baby girl in secret and passed the child off as her niece. This girl, named Patricia Van Cleve Lake, grew up around Hearst and Davies, and even had her wedding at Hearst's estate, with Marian as the aunt maid of honor. Only after Hearst and Davies had died did Patricia drop a bombshell. In 1993, on her own deathbed, she reportedly declared she was Marian and Hearst's illegitimate daughter. This sensational claim seemed to confirm what many had suspected. Vanity Fair described it like a movie plot twist. Patricia Lake declared she was, in fact, the illegitimate daughter of the newspaper tycoon and his movie star mistress. While some relatives dispute the details to this day, most Hollywood historians believe the story is true, especially since Hearst and Davies quietly supported Patricia financially all her life. If so, it means Marian Davies managed to keep an out-of-wedlock birth entirely under wraps in the 1920s, with the Hearst newspaper's cooperation. The Hearst-Davies love child remains one of Hollywood's most intriguing open secrets, only solved when Patricia herself spoke out after more than 50 years of silence. Joan Fontaine. Oscar-winning actress Joan Fontaine, Olivia de Havilland's sister, became an unlikely single mother in the 1950s. While visiting Peru in 1951, Joan met a poor 4-year-old girl named Martita whose family worked at Machu Picchu. On a generous impulse, Fontaine received the parents' permission to informally adopt Martita and bring her to the U.S. as her ward. Joan raised the girl alongside her own biological daughter, Deborah, from Joan's marriage. But this fairy tale did not have a happy ending. Fontaine had promised Martita's parents to send her back for a visit at age 16. When that time came, Martita refused to return to Peru, rebelling against Joan's authority. In response, Fontaine took a hard line. The teen ran away, and the actress disowned her. Promoting her autobiography in 1978, a still bitter Joan Fontaine told the press, "Until my adopted daughter goes back to see her parents, she's not welcome. I do not forgive somebody who makes me break my word." Those harsh words revealed the rift that ended their relationship. The public was largely unaware of this private drama, but insiders knew Fontaine had effectively become a single mother ahead of her time. She's sometimes criticized for how it ended, but one can also view Joan's Peruvian adoption as a sincere, if ultimately failed, attempt to rescue a child from poverty. It certainly underscores how unconventional it was for a major film star in the 1950s to take on motherhood solo. Fontaine herself admitted it was challenging. Being a movie star, she wrote, was no bed of roses, especially while juggling career and kids. Gypsy Rose Lee. Burlesque queen Gypsy Rose Lee wasn't a typical Hollywood actress, but she moved in Hollywood circles. She even had her life story told in the musical Gypsy. In 1944, Gypsy became pregnant under decidedly scandalous conditions. The father was the married director Otto Preminger, with whom she had a brief affair. At the time, Gypsy was technically married to another man, her second husband, William Kirkland, but she knew the baby was Preminger's. Defying the norms, Gypsy Rose Lee carried the baby to term and raised him on her own, never publicly naming Preminger as the father. Her son, Eric Lee Preminger, later recounted that his mother conceived in her mind that I was her child and hers alone. She divorced her husband and on Eric's birth certificate listed a fictional father to avoid scandal. The truth was kept secret until Eric was an adult. At 17 years old, I found out the man named on my birth certificate wasn't my biological father. It was Otto Preminger, Eric Preminger said in a 2023 interview. Gypsy made him swear to keep it secret as long as she was alive, and indeed the public didn't learn Otto Preminger was the father until after Gypsy's death. Gypsy Rose Lee's situation was extraordinary. An independent single mother by choice in the 1940s, at a time when unwed motherhood was deeply stigmatized. Ever the show woman, Gypsy handled it on her own terms, proving herself as bold in life as she was on stage. Miriam Hopkins. In 1932, film star Miriam Hopkins made headlines by becoming one of the first Hollywood celebrities to adopt a baby on her own. Hopkins, recently divorced for the second time, visited a Chicago orphanage and fell in love with a blue-eyed infant boy. She adopted the baby, naming him Michael, and announced she would raise him as a single mother. This was virtually unheard of at the time. The press was fascinated, but Miriam brusquely told reporters, "I hate all this publicity over a simple thing. I don't have to give any reasons for adopting." Because baby Michael happened to closely resemble Miriam, both were blonde and blue-eyed, whispered rumors arose that he might actually be her biological child, born out of wedlock. Hollywood gossips speculated Miriam had perhaps given birth in secret, or adopted a baby that was somehow related to her. Hopkins always denied this. In fact, Michael himself later said, "I was adopted in Chicago from the Cradle Society, and didn't even know he was adopted until his late teens." Still, The rumors persisted that Michael Hopkins was Miriam's own blood. Regardless of the gossip, Miriam Hopkins paved the way by showing a woman could choose single parenthood in an era when that was radical. She adored Michael, the love of her life, and proved a successful mother. It would be decades before single-parent adoptions became common, but Miriam was truly ahead of her time in 1932. Gloria Swanson. Silent film superstar Gloria Swanson also had a child outside the typical marriage framework. In 1920, Gloria had a daughter with her second husband. Their marriage was rocky, ending in 1923 amid scandal. He cited her affairs in the divorce. That same year, as her divorce proceeded, Swanson acquired a baby boy. She adopted an infant son in 1923 and named him Joseph. It's not entirely clear if this adoption was done solo or with the ex-husband's nominal involvement. But effectively, Gloria became Joseph's sole parent after the divorce. The timing raised some speculation. Swanson's divorce filing was sensational. Her husband accused her of adultery with 13 men. So, when she suddenly adopted a baby, people wondered if this was covering up a pregnancy. Some historians have indeed questioned whether baby Joseph might have been Gloria's own child by one of her lovers, quietly passed off as adopted. There's no conclusive evidence of that, however, and most likely it really was a legal adoption. Either way, Gloria Swanson was soon raising 2 kids on her own, her daughter and newly adopted son, while continuing her career. She actually married again in 1925 to Marquis Henri de la Falaise, but by then she'd proven she didn't need a husband to expand her family. Swanson's autobiography mentions how during these years she juggled motherhood and stardom. It wasn't easy, and unfortunately her adopted son was later sent to boarding school when her life became too hectic. Still, Swanson deserves mention for taking the unconventional route of adoption during a divorce, clearly determined to have the family she wanted on her own terms. The era of cover-ups and forced choices. It's important to note that these women were exceptions to the rule. During the studio era, most actresses who found themselves pregnant out of wedlock faced immense pressure to hide or end their pregnancies. For every story like Ingrid's or Loretta's, where a baby was kept, albeit secretly, there are tragic tales of forced separations and abortions. Joan Crawford, for instance, became pregnant by Clark Gable in the early 1930s, but MGM's fixers arranged an abortion and covered it up with a fake story about a miscarriage. Lana Turner, the bombshell of the 40s, got pregnant at 20 by a man she wasn't married to. The studio rushed her off to have a secret abortion in Hawaii, then docked the costs from her pay and had her back on set within a week. The talented Dorothy Dandridge became pregnant by director Otto Preminger, who, as in Gypsy Rose Lee's case, refused to leave his wife. The studio flat-out demanded she abort, especially because an unwed interracial pregnancy was considered unthinkable then. Even America's sweetheart, Judy Garland, was pressured into terminating pregnancies, once when she was a teen, pregnant by her first husband, and again after an affair, because the studios believed a childlike star shouldn't be a mother. These grim realities highlight just how rare and courageous it was for a Golden Age actress to actually have a baby outside of marriage. Most were given no real choice by the moguls. Those who did keep their children often had to resort to elaborate subterfuge, fake adoptions, secret deliveries, etc., as we've seen. The stories of these Golden Age actresses reveal a double life behind Hollywood's glamorous facade. Ingrid Bergman was denounced as evil for bearing a love child. Loretta Young went to near-hysterical lengths to hide her baby for decades. Constance Bennett lied about her son's identity to protect him. Joan Crawford broke laws to adopt and unwittingly tapped into a black market baby trade. Marian Davies likely raised her own daughter in secrecy to her grave. Joan Fontaine, Gypsy Rose Lee, Miriam Hopkins, and Gloria Swanson each, in their own way, defied convention to have children on their terms, and faced gossip or heartbreak as a result. These women were stars on screen, but off-screen they were mothers fiercely protecting their children and reputations in a time that afforded unmarried women very little forgiveness. Their experiences range from inspiring to heartbreaking. Yet all of them, by having babies without marriage, helped chip away at a taboo. They lived the reality that stardom did not exempt them from love, desire, or mistakes. It only forced them to hide those things more. Today, decades later, we can finally shed light on these once hidden chapters, thanks to biographies, tell-all memoirs, and the courage of friends and family who eventually spoke out with the truth. As scandalous as it all seemed in the mid-20th century, these stories ultimately humanize the icons of Hollywood's golden era. They remind us that behind the manufactured images were real women making difficult choices, and sometimes breaking the rules for the sake of their children. Each of these actresses left a complicated legacy, but one part of that legacy is the proof that motherhood in Hollywood could not always be contained by a ring on the finger. Their secret, and not-so-secret babies, will forever be a part of old Hollywood lore, representing both the oppressive morality of the studio system and the resilience of the women who found ways to outwit it.